Karen didn't even wait for the dust to settle before she screamed. "Send the next one. Don't stop the pour." I had barely stepped out of my workshop when I saw it. A 30-ton cement truck grinding across my family's 93-year-old bridge, the planks bending like wet cardboard. The driver looked terrified. Karen didn't care. She jabbed her HOA clipboard at him like she was leading an attack. I shouted for them to stop. She shouted louder. And just as the fifth truck lined up on the dirt road, rumbling like a threat, Karen smirked at me and said, "Your bridge will hold. And if it doesn't, that sounds like a you problem." She had no idea what was coming next. Nolan Reeves never expected that his quiet morning routine, pouring a mug of black coffee, scratching his dog Rusty behind the ears, and stepping onto the porch of his 40-acre homestead, would turn into a front-row seat to the most reckless act the Willow Brook HOA had ever attempted. But there it was, a cement truck, then another, and another, each one rolling down the narrow dirt road toward his grandfather's bridge like it was some kind of demolition derby. Where Nolan stood, the early sunlight spilled across the plains, revealing the full landscape of his life. The golden sweep of hay fields, the slow churn of Willow Creek, and the wooden bridge his grandfather built in 1930. The same bridge Nolan spent summers repainting, rehabbing, and repairing with the man who had raised him. That bridge wasn't just a piece of property. It was family, and right now it was under siege. Karen, the HOA's self-appointed queen of order, a woman whose clipboard Nolan suspected was fused to her arm, strutted around the dirt roadway like a drill sergeant in heels. Her shoulder-length blonde hair bounced as she turned sharply toward the truck drivers. "All right, gentlemen, truck number 4. Let's go," she barked as if she were rallying troops on the front lines. A puff of dust rose as she slammed her heel into the ground. "This bridge is unsafe, Mr. Reeves. The HOA voted on a complete structural enhancement. I'm simply enforcing the resolution by sending cement trucks across it." Nolan called back. She ignored him completely, or worse, pretended not to hear. The fourth truck rumbled toward the bridge, wheels sinking slightly into the soft earth. Rusty whined beside Nolan, ears pinned back as the sound vibrated through the valley. "You keep making that face, buddy, and you'll scare her," Nolan muttered, patting Rusty on the head. Crack! A sharp snap echoed from the bridge as truck number 4 placed its full weight on the first third of the span. Karen looked thrilled, almost triumphant, the kind of gleeful energy only an HOA officer on a power trip could produce. She spun around and waved her clipboard dramatically. "This proves my point. It needs to be replaced. We're doing you a favor, Nolan." He gritted his teeth. A favor would have been letting me handle the inspection like I offered. A favor would have been respecting property boundaries. A favor sure as hell wouldn't involve 20 tons of concrete. Karen stepped closer, lowering her sunglasses to stare at him from just inches away. "Maybe if you didn't cling to your little family antiques," she sneered, "we wouldn't have to step in." Family antiques. That's what she called it. Nolan stared past her at the bridge. Weathered, yes, but strong, hand-built, reinforced year after year with care. His grandfather's initials were carved into the center beam. He taught Nolan how to tie knots, sharpen blades, and skip stones right there. And now it was bending. The boards bowed as truck number 4 moved to the middle. A loud groan echoed through the valley, a sound like the earth itself complaining. Then Karen shouted something that made Nolan's blood run cold. "All right, truck 5, stand by. We'll roll you across as soon as this one clears." Nolan's voice shot out involuntarily. "Karen, stop." She blinked, then smiled. A slow, smug smile that only widened when she tipped her sunglasses back into place. "I don't take orders from people who own historical wood piles." Truck number 4 lurched, shaking violently. Crack, crack, crack. The truck driver pressed the brakes, but it was too late. The middle of the bridge splintered downward as one support beam gave way, then another. Birds exploded from the nearby trees as the wood screamed under the weight. The truck's front tires dipped. Then its entire hood plunged nose first into the creek. Water splashed 10 feet into the air. The sound boomed across the plains. Karen shrieked like a firework had gone off beside her ear. Nolan didn't move. Couldn't move. The bridge, his grandfather's bridge, was gone. Destroyed. And Karen? She stared at the collapsing structure with her mouth hanging open before slowly turning toward Nolan with a look he would remember for the rest of his life. A mixture of horror and denial. "You," she stammered. "You're liable for this. You didn't maintain it. This is your fault." Nolan stepped toward her, eyes locked, voice low and steady. "No, Karen, you caused this." And for the first time that morning, she had no words. By the time the dust settled and the cement truck finally stopped rocking inside the creek, Karen was already on the phone. Not with her insurance, not with the construction crew, with the HOA board and the sheriff's office. Nolan watched her pace circles on the dirt road like a general who'd lost a battle but planned to rewrite history before the smoke even cleared. Her blonde hair blew wildly in the breeze as she jabbed her finger toward the destroyed bridge, his bridge, claiming loudly that he had sabotaged it. He leaned one arm against the old sycamore tree near the creek's edge, the only thing that had survived storms, floods, and 2 generations of Reevesmen. Rusty lay beside him, ears low, sensing his owner's pulse rising. "Yes, Sheriff? I'm standing right here," Karen said dramatically, pointing up at a helicopter that wasn't even there. "The man is refusing to take responsibility. We've suffered massive damages. Dangerous damages." Nolan's jaw flexed. Dangerous? She sent 4 cement trucks across a bridge built when radios were still luxury items. But Karen didn't care about truth. She cared about noise, about volume, and about her reputation in the Willow Brook subdivision, the neat collection of boxy beige homes built around Nolan's land like a half-finished crescent moon. Within 20 minutes, 3 HOA board members showed up in their matching navy windbreakers, like mall cops with delusions of grandeur. The first one, a tall, bald guy with a clipboard, stepped forward. "Nolan, we need to discuss the damages you've caused to community infrastructure." Nolan blinked. Hard. Community infrastructure? That bridge has been on my land since 1930. My grandfather built it. My father rebuilt it. I maintained it. Karen crossed her arms, lips pursed smugly. "Then why does the HOA map show access rights through this route?" "Because your developer tried to redraw my boundary lines without asking." The board members exchanged glances, the guilty kind. Still, the bald one cleared his throat. "Look, the point is this is now a legal matter. A cement truck is in the creek. The county is going to hear about this. The EPA might. And unless you want thousands of dollars in fines." "Thousands?" Nolan cut in. "Karen ran 4 trucks across here. You overloaded a historical structure." Karen stepped closer, eyes cold behind her sunglasses. "You can't prove that." Nolan held up his phone. "I've got every truck recorded since sunrise. I have timestamps. And I have the warning email I sent your HOA last week." Her face froze. Finally, a crack in her armor. But she recovered quickly, flipping her hair and turning to her board backup. "That recording means nothing. This land is practically community land now. Our subdivision has free access to it. And as HOA president, I have the right to authorize community development trucks." Nolan laughed once. Humorless. "Karen, your HOA is 76 homes and 1 gazebo. This is 40 acres of private farmland. And you are blocking community progress. You are trespassing. And now you're trespassing with heavy machinery." The second board member, a short woman clutching a tablet, stepped in nervously. "And maybe we should wait for the sheriff." "We don't need the sheriff." Karen snapped. "We need accountability." Nolan's voice dropped, calm, controlled, the tone he used back when supervising crews on multi-million-dollar engineering projects. "You owe me a new bridge. You owe the creek cleanup. And you owe my land piece." Karen smirked, stepping up until she was nearly chest to chest with him. "Oh, Nolan, you think this is over? I've already sent pictures to the county. By the time the sheriff gets here, you'll be the one in trouble." Rusty growled softly. Nolan didn't flinch, because what Karen didn't know, what she would hate knowing, was that Nolan had something stronger than a recording. He had the original deed, the county survey maps, and a legal structure that had existed decades before Willow Brook HOA ever painted its first mailbox beige. The land was his. The creek was his. And the bridge? Well, that was about to become her biggest mistake. By the time the sheriff's cruiser rumbled down the gravel road, Karen was already rehearsing her lines like a theater villain warming up before spotlight. She straightened her sunglasses, smoothed her HOA-branded blouse, and stepped forward like she owned the land beneath her heels. Nolan recognized the sheriff immediately. Sheriff Ward, a man whose face had seen too many pointless disputes and too few actual crimes. He stepped out of the car with the tired energy of someone who'd finished his coffee too early and regretted it ever since. Karen marched toward him. "There he is," she shouted dramatically, pointing at Nolan with both hands like she was unveiling a criminal mastermind. "That man intentionally sabotaged our community development trucks. He destroyed a major access route and endangered workers." Nolan blinked slowly, exhaling through his nose. Morning, Sheriff. Sheriff Ward rubbed the bridge of his nose. Morning, Nolan. Want to tell me why my dispatch just sent me a call about a violent landowner attacking construction equipment? Nolan stared at Karen. She smiled sweetly. I didn't say violent, she lied instantly. I said unstable and possibly aggressive. Nolan folded his arms. I've been standing here with a dog and a coffee thermos. The only unstable thing here is her story. Karen gasped dramatically. Sheriff, he's trespassing on HOA land. Sheriff Ward turned slowly, painfully slowly, toward Nolan. Trespassing on his own ranch. Karen pushed her sunglasses up like she was the star witness in a crime documentary. The HOA map clearly shows this access path as community easement, meaning the community has the right to use this bridge. Nolan pulled a folded envelope from his back pocket, thick, worn, and stamped by the county clerk. Sheriff, he said calmly, offering it over, this is the original land deed. 40 acres. Private. No public easements. No community rights. And the bridge is entirely within my property lines. Karen lunged forward. Those documents are outdated. They're certified 5 months ago. The HOA board members shifted awkwardly. One of them whispered, Karen, we should maybe review. Hush, Leonard, she snapped. Sheriff Ward opened the envelope, scanned the papers, then nodded. Yep, that's his land. Karen's jaw dropped. Sheriff, he forged that. Now that made the sheriff look up sharply. Forging a county-stamped deed is a felony, Miss Stetson. Karen paused. Too long. Long enough that even her board members took a step away from her. But then, because Karen never met a cliff she wouldn't jump from, she switched tactics. Fine, she said, flipping her hair. Forget the land deed. Look at this disaster. A cement truck is in the creek. The water is contaminated. The EPA will freak out. Our development timeline is ruined. The cement truck was sent here by you, Nolan countered. 4 trucks. In one morning. After I warned you the bridge couldn't handle more than 15 tons. Karen scoffed. You're an old engineer, Nolan. Not a structural expert. I built 3 county bridges. Sheriff Ward coughed into his fist, a half-suppressed laugh. Karen ignored it and pointed at the sycamore tree. Sheriff, he deliberately weakened this bridge to sabotage us. Nolan turned slowly, very slowly, and stared at her. Karen, my grandfather built that bridge. My father rebuilt it after the 1964 flood. I reinforced it myself 14 years ago. Why would I destroy a piece of my family's history? Karen had no answer, but she wasn't done fighting. She stepped up close, heels crunching in the gravel. You think this is over? The county will side with us. The HOA will vote to open a lawsuit. Our construction company will file damages. I will make sure you regret trying to humiliate me. Nolan remained steady. Karen, this is my land, my bridge, my creek, and you're done bulldozing over people just because they don't live in your cookie-cutter subdivision. The board members behind her looked at each other, for the first time, questioning their queen. Sheriff Ward closed the folder and stepped between them. All right, I'm calling the county surveyor. We're going to settle this once and for all. Karen, you and your crew stay right here. Nolan, don't go far. Nolan nodded. Karen forced a smile that looked like it hurt her teeth. That's fine, Sheriff. I've waited long enough for justice. Nolan looked out across the creek, eyes narrowing at the collapsed bridge. He could out-argue Karen. He could out-proof her. But what he needed now was a plan she wouldn't see coming. A trap not for trucks, but for her arrogance. For the first time all morning, the valley along Willow Creek went quiet. No trucks rumbling. No shouting. No HOA supervisors pretending to check clipboards. Just Karen pacing in tiny, furious circles like a hummingbird with anger issues, while Nolan leaned against the hood of the sheriff's cruiser, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching the creek drag chunks of the broken bridge downstream. He had been here before. Not this exact fight, but the feeling of a battle brewing beneath the surface. In Afghanistan, in county contract disputes, in construction litigation, there was always a moment when your opponent believed they had already won. And that was the perfect moment to let them talk themselves into a corner. Sheriff Ward radioed the county office. Yeah, send Davenport. Tell him to bring the 2018 plat maps and the soil displacement camera. Karen perked up like a meerkat. Sheriff, Davenport is biased. He worked with Nolan on that river culvert project 10 years ago. Ward didn't even look at her. He also cited you last month for illegal water redirection, Karen. She froze. Even her own HOA board members winced. Nolan hid a smile behind his coffee mug. 20 minutes later, a dusty white county truck rattled onto the property. Out stepped County Surveyor Tom Davenport, tall, gray-bearded, and carrying more equipment than a small expedition. His boots hit the ground with the heavy assurance of a man who could read land the way others read traffic signs. He squinted at the mess. Well, hell. Karen immediately marched toward him. Tom, listen, before you jump to conclusions. He held up a gloved hand. Nope, not listening to anything until I see paperwork. She recoiled like she'd touched a hot pan. Sheriff Ward handed Davenport the deed. Davenport studied it once, twice, then nodded. Yep, accurate, updated, boundary lines confirmed. This whole stretch, he pointed toward the bridge, is Nolan's private property. Karen inhaled sharply, outrage rising like steam. That deed is wrong. Davenport turned his full body toward her. Ma'am, this land has been surveyed 27 times since 1930. The only thing wrong here is whatever GPS app you're using to justify this mess. The HOA board members behind her started whispering again. Nolan heard snippets. She said the bridge was community access. She told us the county approved. She said the land wasn't deeded. Karen whirled on them like a cornered cat. Enough. I have the HOA charter. We can override property disputes. Sheriff Ward coughed hard. No, you can't. Karen spun back. What? Ward crossed his arms. The HOA charter has zero power over land outside the subdivision. You can write whatever rules you want. Paint mailboxes blue, plant tulips, sacrifice goats. It doesn't matter off HOA land. The silence afterward was delicious. Karen's face twisted into a new expression, desperation wrapped inside denial. She clapped twice, summoning the construction foreman. Bring the documents. The new plot plan shows this road as a future connector. It means nothing, Davenport interrupted sharply, pulling a rolled map from his truck. Your subdivision plan has been rejected 3 times. County won't approve another access road until environmental impact is resolved. Karen's forehead pulsed. What environmental impact? Davenport pointed toward the bridge ruins. Dumping 40,000 pounds of cement into a protected creek. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. But Nolan stepped forward first. Tom, what happens now? Davenport scanned the damage and shook his head. Well, if the HOA wants to use this land, they'll need a right-of-way agreement. Nolan didn't react outwardly, but inside he smiled. A right-of-way agreement meant rent, a fee, or full purchase. And Karen had just destroyed the only bridge that made their expansion possible. Karen spoke through her teeth. Fine, we'll negotiate. Nolan said calmly, I'm not negotiating. Karen froze. You have to. No, I don't. And now that your trucks have contaminated my creek, you'll be negotiating with the EPA instead. That landed hard. For the first time all morning, Karen looked genuinely scared. Not furious, not arrogant, not smug. Scared. Sheriff Ward turned to her. Megan Stetson, until the EPA clears this site, all development activity is halted. Karen shouted. Halted? We have deadlines. Investors. Permits pending. That's your problem, Ward said. Not Nolan's. Davenport packed his gear. And Karen, if a 6 truck had come through, you would have killed someone on that bridge. The HOA board stepped away from her now, physically separating themselves. Karen's reign was cracking. But Nolan knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to surrender. She doubled down and tripled down, which is exactly what he needed her to do, because the trap he was setting wasn't built of wood or steel. It was built of her own arrogance, and she was walking straight into it. By late afternoon, Willow Creek looked like a crime scene wrapped in sunlight. The demolished bridge lay twisted in the water like the ribs of some ancient creature. The last chunks of concrete drifted downstream, bumping softly against the willow roots. And the valley, normally quiet, normally peaceful, now buzzed with the kind of tension you could taste in the air. Nolan stood beside the mangled metal guardrail, hands on his hips, staring at the place where generations of Reeves men had walked, carried timber, hauled supplies, and crossed that bridge to reach the orchard on the far side. His grandfather built that bridge in 1930 with his own hands. His father reinforced it in 1985. Nolan himself resurfaced it just 5 years ago. It wasn't just a bridge. It was lineage. 5th truck, he muttered, eyes narrowing. You couldn't stop at 4, could you, Karen? Behind him, Karen Stetson argued with her HOA board so loudly that even the creek seemed to flow quieter just to listen. I didn't order the trucks. You think I schedule cement deliveries myself? I am the president, President's delegate. One of the board members snapped back. You told us the bridge was public. You said the land would transfer. I said it was in the process of transferring. That's not a thing, Megan. Nolan almost felt bad for them. Almost. What they didn't know, what Karen definitely didn't know, was that he was already 3 steps ahead. He always had been. Because while Karen was spiraling, Nolan walked calmly toward the dented, mud-splattered cement truck at the edge of the creek. The foreman stood beside it, elbows on knees, rubbing his face like he desperately wanted a beer. You the property owner? The foreman asked weakly. Sure am. The man exhaled like he'd been waiting for that answer all day. Then I should probably tell you, the HOA refused to sign liability waivers. They told us everything here was county-maintained and insured. Nolan blinked once, then twice. They said what? That this whole area was under HOA jurisdiction. He almost laughed. Almost. But he was too tired to enjoy the stupidity. Sir, the foreman added, voice dropping, we're not touching another inch of this land. These trucks are leaving as is. And if the HOA wants anything cleaned up, they can call someone else. Nolan nodded. Fair enough. As the foreman walked away, Sheriff Ward approached with a clipboard. You know, Ward said, if the HOA hadn't lied to these contractors, none of this would have happened. Nolan let out a slow breath. Sheriff, can you do me a favor? Ward raised an eyebrow. That depends. I want everything documented. Every truck, every axle load, every picture of that bridge before and after collapse. Every statement, every recording. Ward gave a small smirk. You planning something? Oh, Nolan replied. I'm planning everything. Ward checked a few boxes on his form. Well, good news then. Karen just made your case airtight. Nolan turned. Karen was screaming again, this time at the board members, waving her arms like a malfunctioning wind turbine. You're all incompetent. None of you can handle a simple project. Do you know how long I've been working on this subdivision expansion? The board members shuffled back. One muttered, we should call an emergency vote. Another whispered, she's going to sink all of us. A third said, we're liable for this, aren't we? Nolan stepped forward. Yes, he said loudly enough for all of them to turn. You all are. Karen spun around. You quiet. The adults are talking. Nolan smiled. Good. Then listen like one. Karen's jaw clenched. Don't take that tone with. You're finished. Nolan's voice cut clean through the chaos. Not because of the bridge. Not because of the trucks. But because you lied to your contractors, your board, the police, and the county. Karen laughed too loudly. Finished? No, I'm fine. You think you're clever? Nolan? You think you can catch me? HOA presidents don't get caught. We have committees. The board collectively groaned. Nolan stepped closer. You're right. HOA presidents don't get caught. Karen smirked. But Nolan continued, fraudulent developers do. That wiped the smirk off her face like a hard slap. What were you implying? She stammered. I'm not implying anything. Nolan pulled out his phone. I'm telling you. He tapped the screen. An audio recording played. Karen's own voice echoed out. Push the trucks through. Who cares whose land it is? Just get it done. I'll deal with the county later. Her board gasped. Sheriff Ward's eyebrows shot up. Davenport froze mid-step. And Karen turned whiter than the cement still dripping from the truck chute. You recorded me? That's illegal. Nolan shrugged. Colorado is a single-party consent state. Karen staggered backward. The board members stepped away from her. Ward radioed something into his shoulder mic. The trap had sprung, and Karen felt the jaws close. The next 3 days felt like the entire county had turned its eyes toward Willow Creek. By sunrise the morning after the collapse, the old bridge had become a spectacle. Half curiosity, half scandal. Pickup trucks rolled up and parked along the road. Farmers leaned on their tailgates. Neighbors snapped pictures. Deputies measured the crater where the structure had once stood. And Karen Stetson? She stayed inside her house, blinds shut tight, as if sunlight itself were now evidence against her. Nolan watched all of it from his porch, sipping coffee, the steam curling into the cold morning air. Every creak of law enforcement radios, every rattling tape measure, every muttered, yep, this was overloaded, felt like justice slowly taking shape. Ward's cruiser pulled up around 8 a.m. Morning, Nolan, he said as he stepped out. Morning, Sheriff. Ward handed him a stack of papers an inch thick. Preliminary incident report. County sending a full engineering team this afternoon. They want structural analysis, cost evaluation, the whole 9 yards. Nolan flipped through the pages. So many signatures. So many liabilities. And what about Karen? He asked. Ward smirked. She's avoiding interviews. claims she's emotionally distressed. One of my deputies overheard her yelling that she needs time to strategically reshape the narrative. Whatever that means. Nolan snorted. Sounds like Karen. Ward nodded toward the collapsed bridge. I also got word the county commissioners want you present at tomorrow's emergency hearing. They need direct testimony from the property owner. Good, Nolan said. I'll be there. And Nolan, Ward tapped the report cover. What you have, recordings, timestamps, witness accounts, it's bad for her. Real bad. That was an understatement. The county hearing took place in an old courthouse that still smelled like varnish and paper files. Rows of chairs filled with Willow Brook residents, news reporters, construction workers, and HOA board members. Everyone wanted to see what would happen to Karen Stetson. Nolan sat in the front row, not because he wanted attention, but because he wanted Karen to see the man she tried to steamroll, sitting calmly, unshaken. Karen entered 10 minutes late, wearing oversized sunglasses and a blazer stiff enough to stand by itself. She acted composed, chin held high, but her trembling fingers told the real story. Her board didn't sit with her. That alone spoke volumes. Commissioner Ellis banged her gavel. This hearing concerns unauthorized infrastructure activity, property destruction, and potential fraudulent statements by the Willow Brook HOA. Every head turned toward Karen. Mrs. Stetson, Ellis continued, do you have an opening statement? Karen cleared her throat. Yes, Your Honor. This entire situation was simply a misunderstanding. Our records suggested the land was pending transfer. The bridge appeared to be on a public right-of-way. My board acted on information given to them. And the collapse. Nolan felt his jaw tighten. She was really doing it, really pretending she knew nothing. Commissioner Ellis held up a finger. Before you continue, we've reviewed a recording entered into evidence by Mr. Reeves. Your voice giving explicit instruction to force cement trucks across the bridge despite uncertainty over property ownership. A ripple went through the room. Karen froze. We also have statements from multiple contractors, Ellis added, saying you assured them the bridge was maintained and insured by the county, which was false. Karen's lips parted, but no sound came out. Furthermore, Ellis said, county maps clearly show the bridge being entirely on Mr. Reeves's private property. Someone in the audience whispered, she's done. The commissioner turned to the HOA board. Any comment? The board collectively stepped away from their microphones. One member finally said, we were misled. Karen spun on them, whisper shouting, cowards. All of you cowards. Ellis raised the gavel again. Mrs. Stetson, this hearing is not for outbursts. Given the evidence, the county will pursue restitution for property damage. And since this involves fraudulent misrepresentation to contractors, you will also face a civil investigation. Karen's sunglasses slid slightly down her nose, revealing eyes wide with panic. But you can't do this. I'm the HOA president. You can't just. Mrs. Stetson, Ellis said calmly, you're not being targeted because you're president. You're being held accountable because you broke the law. The gavel struck. Karen crumpled back into her chair. And for the first time since the truck showed up, Nolan felt the tightness in his chest loosen. It wasn't victory. Not yet. But the tide was turning. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Nolan, cameras in hand. Mr. Reeves, will you rebuild the bridge? Are you suing the HOA? What's next for Willow Creek? Nolan paused on the courthouse steps. The sun lit the valley behind him like a promise. I'll rebuild the bridge, he said quietly, and I'll rebuild the truth they tried to bury under cement. The reporters went silent. Then their cameras clicked like a small storm. That night, Nolan walked the creek alone. The water whispered around the broken pillars. Fireflies blinked above the grass. His grandfather's land felt wounded, but not defeated. And neither was he. Tomorrow he'd begin crafting his own trap. Not one made of steel or wood, but one made of law, land rights, history, and truth. Karen had destroyed the bridge. But Nolan? Nolan was going to destroy her control. The sirens faded slowly, leaving behind the soft hum of the creek, the rustle of cottonwoods, and the metallic creak of the temporary barricades the sheriff's department had put up. Nolan stood alone on the edge of the ravine where his grandfather's bridge once proudly spanned the water. The temporary LED work lamps still glowed along the banks, their harsh white light bouncing off the pale rocks like tiny fireflies trapped in glass. The trucks were gone, the sheriff's deputies were gone, and, finally, Karen was gone. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. Because the sunrise he would watch in a few hours would be the first one in months where he didn't have to brace for the sound of another cement truck rumbling across his land. The first morning in which Willow Brook couldn't treat him like a doormat. The first day where his grandfather's name didn't feel like a weight, but a weapon. And no one intended to use it. Karen's arrest had been the main event, but the court hearing was the finale. And Nolan had been preparing for that months before he even realized he'd need to. Every creek measurement, every structural stress diagram of the original bridge, every photograph of unauthorized construction on his property. He gathered it all meticulously, almost subconsciously, as if some part of him knew the HOA was going to try something insane eventually. He wasn't wrong. The courtroom was full before the judge even entered. Willow Brook residents whispered nervously. Some tried to hide behind sunglasses, others behind bravado. Karen wasn't hiding at all. She stood stiffly beside her attorney, jaw clenched, hair perfect, expression smug in that brittle way people look when they know they're losing but refuse to admit it. Her attorney shuffled papers, whispering nervously, as though trying to convince her to look even a little remorseful. She did not. Nolan sat on the opposite side of the aisle, hands folded calmly. His lawyer, Deirdre Fallon, sharp-tongued, eagle-eyed, feared by insurance companies and adored by landowners, leaned in. "You ready?" she whispered. Nolan nodded. "I've been ready since the first truck." The judge entered. The room stood, and the showdown began. "Your Honor," Deirdre began, voice slicing through the silence like steel. "This case is not about a bridge. It's about trespass, repeated, deliberate, arrogant trespass. The HOA acted like this man's property was their personal construction zone." Karen scoffed loudly. The judge didn't even look at her as he said, "Ma'am, if you interrupt again, I will hold you in contempt." She froze, lips twitching. Deirdre continued. Mr. Reeves' bridge was not only historic. It was the only safe crossing on his land. It had stood for nearly a century until the HOA sent 5 cement trucks, without permission, without the right-of-way, without a single written agreement. They destroyed it, and then tried to blame him. Karen's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client." "No," the judge said, rubbing his forehead. "Sit down. I've read the file. All 187 pages. Karen's attorney sat. Deirdre's voice softened but sharpened again at the edges. "Mr. Reeves isn't here for revenge. He's here for accountability." The judge turned to Nolan. "Would you like to speak?" Nolan rose. Not theatrical, not emotional, just steady, as if the land itself had taken human form. "My grandfather built that bridge with his own hands," he began. "He laid every board, every bolt. It lasted 90 years. And it would have lasted 90 more if heavy trucks hadn't been driven across it." He paused. "I try to warn them. I try to stop them. I try to reason with them." His gaze shifted briefly toward Karen. But the HOA didn't care about safety, or rules, or the law, only power. Silence thickened. "And when they took my patience for weakness," he continued, "I reminded them that land remembers who owns it." Deirdre squeezed his arm once as he sat down. Karen erupted. "This is insane. He's lying. Everyone knows that bridge was unstable if he'd maintained it like a responsible landowner." "Enough," the judge snapped. "Ms. Karen, stand." She did, reluctantly. The judge's sentencing was brutal in its clarity. "Your HOA trespassed, operated without permits, destroyed private infrastructure, endangered public safety, and then attempted to cover it up. Therefore, I am issuing the following orders." A ripple rushed through the room. 1. Full cost of bridge reconstruction, paid by the HOA personally, not its members. Karen paled. 2. Civil fines totaling $185,000 for unauthorized construction use of private land. She swallowed hard. 3. Removal of Karen from her position as HOA president, effective immediately. Gasps spread across the room. 4. A formal restraining order preventing Karen or her contractors from setting foot on Nolan's acreage ever again. Karen's mouth hung open. The judge finished quietly. "And Ms. Karen, I strongly recommend you rethink your understanding of the word neighbor." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Nolan ignored them. He didn't need attention. He needed closure. He returned home to the sound of willow leaves brushing the wind. The creek murmured. The broken remains of the old bridge still rested where they'd fallen, but they no longer looked like ruins. They looked like a foundation. A few days later, specialized crews hired by the HOA, under strict court order, began reconstruction. Nolan supervised every bolt, every weld. He approved the steel reinforcement, the weight distribution plates, the new guardrails. The new bridge, built stronger, wider, and engineered to last another century, rose from the ashes like something his grandfather would have been proud of. When the final support beam slid into place, Nolan nodded. "Looks good," he said. The foreman smiled. "Strong enough for anything." Nolan chuckled softly. "Funny. That's what my grandfather said, too." The crew packed up, leaving Nolan alone with the new structure stretching proudly over Willow Creek. He walked across it slowly, listening to the subtle creak of new steel. Halfway across, he placed his hand on the railing and whispered, "We're home again." That evening, as the sky turned gold and purple, Nolan lit the old lantern that had hung in his grandfather's workshop. He placed it at the foot of the bridge. It cast a warm circle of light that reflected off the water like a quiet promise. He didn't need revenge. He needed restoration, and he'd gotten it. Karen's downfall wasn't loud. It was thorough. The subdivision elected a new HOA board. Residents began avoiding her. Rumors swirled about her moving away, about lawsuits piling up, about her losing everything she tried to take from Nolan. But Nolan didn't celebrate that. He simply lived. On his land. On his terms. And every time he crossed that new bridge, stronger than ever, he remembered. No matter what an HOA tries to steal, legacy is impossible to bulldoze. In the end, the creek flowed free, the new bridge stood firm, and the HOA's corruption collapsed right along with Karen's ego. Nolan didn't just fix what they broke. He proved they should have never messed with him in the first place. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more HOA chaos and justice served.